Darkmaw chips off the nightmare block. They've promised that dreams can come true, but forgot to mention that nightmares are dreams too. Oscar Wilde. Foreword. The subject of dreams has always intrigued me. What are they? Where do they come from? Where do you go when you dream? Some dreams seem related, in a disjointed fashion, to reality and one's immediate problems or concerns. Others seem to come as complete stories, whole packages of information, coherent and seemingly sensical within their own criteria. Are they just figments of one's imagination? Gateways to other worlds? Or even more disturbing, are they real memories from some forgotten age? A long, long time ago, in a galaxy far, far away, so to speak, fragments from some ancestral data bank, surviving in the protoplasm of human DNA. Or perhaps the recollections of a previous and distant reincarnation, of the kind that is preached in Hinduism and certain other faiths. Maybe it's all just in your head. Maybe we will never know for certain, but does that really make it any less real? This book is an adventure, an exploration into dream stuff. Each short story herein has been written as it came tomb, in near complete form, and I have worked to retain the original integrity and mood of each story. Each of my transcriptions have attempted to capture the nostalgic reality, the odd déjà vu of the dream world. Enjoy.
Yōsei-tachi no Kyōen, A Feast of Fairies. For those readers unfamiliar with the Japanese tongue, there are a few words I'd like to introduce you to before we start. Kamigami, gods. Yōkai, roughly translates to supernatural beings, ghosts and spirits. Oni, a specific type of evil spirit, or more loosely, demons, trolls, monsters, etc. Ame no Nuboko, the spear the gods Izanagi and Izanami used to create the first landmass of Japan. Let us begin. Haruki-kun! Ayami called out for her son to help her clean up the remains of the evening meal. She stood, with her hands full of empty dishes, and watched her son leap up from playing with his wooden toys across the large open room, which served as a combination of dining room and kitchen. Yes, mother, replied the small boy, as he hopped and skipped barefooted over the tatami mats to her call. She smiled down at her boy. He was 6 years old now. He was strong and intelligent, but even more, he was kind and so well-mannered. Your father and his guests have gone to continue their work in the city. I need your help to clean up tonight. There is a lot of food left over, and it mustn't go to waste. We can use it to feed the fishes, and as an offering to the yokai. The stories say that the yokai are troublesome spirits, and by honoring them, we can do our share of the work of keeping them occupied and out of mischief for the greater Kamigami. The old stories say that, if we do this, the Kamigami can focus their attention on more important things, like bringing a fruitful harvest for our farmers this year. She indicated 2 large serving bowls, which she had heaped full with the remains of the various dinner dishes. There was white rice, pan-fried chicken, dumplings, nori, dried seaweed, and pickled vegetables. Then she smiled. At the least, it is a neat way of disposing of the food waste. You know what to do. Haruki nodded. Yes, mother. Though his mother gave lip service to the yokai, he could tell she didn't really believe in them. She certainly couldn't see them like he could. He had fed the yokai many times now. At first, his mother had taken him along with her many moons ago to dispose of the food waste each night, and they had offered the food to the yokai together. But his mother never spoke of seeing them. Maybe it was because she was a grown-up, and he was still a child. All he knew was that whenever he had pointed them out to her, she had given him an indulgent smile and shaken her head. However, she never told him directly that they didn't exist, and she never intimated that he was lying when he shared with her his fantastic stories of them. She was a good mother. "I will feed them," he said, coming out of his cogitations. He took one of the large bowls full of leftovers between his delicate arms and tottered towards the doorway, which opened from the kitchen area directly onto the back garden pathway. He placed the dish down carefully by the doorway, slipped on his sandals, and climbed down the steep single step to the garden path. He then took the bowl up in his arms once again. Ayami called out a final word of admonition. "Remember, Haruki, do not cross the threshold from our garden to the riverbank. I do not want you slipping and falling into the river. Also," she said conspiratorially, "it is said that the yokai are bound by the kamigami not to trespass upon our personal property, and though they are mostly harmless, certain ones are malicious of character and would love the chance to play nasty pranks upon you." "Yes, mother," replied Haruki. He knew the rules, of course. She had told him many stories of all the different types of yokai and the naughty games they had played on families who did not follow the rules laid out by the kamigami, even though he knew she didn't really believe in them. He knew she only wanted to scare him so that he stayed away from the river at night. But he knew better. He would be cautious for the sake of the yokai, not the river water. He moved away from the warm yellow light of the kitchen and into the shade of the garden path. On his left was the dark and silent rice paper walls of his house's rear rooms. On his right was the garden, full of small plants, flowers, and stone statues, all dimly lit by the golden light streaming from the kitchen. Beyond the narrow strip of garden on his right was a thick wall of leafy trees and shrubbery, which acted like a wall between their property and the river that ran past their house. There was a certain section of the path that became very narrow, and the leafy trees began to press in on him from the right. To Haruki, it felt like he was walking through a dim natural corridor, the outer wall of his house forming one wall, the thick leafy trees forming the other. He passed the vacant gap, cut out of the trees to his right, with its dirt slope leading into the river. This cut-out gap acted like a garbage chute for their food waste, and was one of the 2 feeding spots for the fish, or as Haruki knew, the yokai. It was currently dark, empty, and silent. The black water of the river looked sluggish, almost still, as it floated imperceptibly by. Haruki continued on, and the golden light streaming from the kitchen faded to grey upon the leaves as he went through the most narrow part of the natural corridor. After a tense moment in the dim light, he made it to the end of the path and out into the open area of their yard behind the house. Here was an open and beautifully landscaped garden, with a small stream spanned by an ornate bridge, sand gardens with hand-picked boulders and stone statues, and a majestic cherry blossom tree at the garden's center. Narrow stone footpaths wound their way through the harmonious garden, allowing one to move about it without disturbing the careful zen of its arrangements. Here, the yellow light of the kitchen was replaced by the bright silvery light of the moon. The right edge of this picturesque garden was bordered by the thick wall of leafy trees, and beyond them, the dark flowing river, the river where the yokai live. There, across the garden, was a second section cut out of the wall of trees, revealing a muddy strip of dirt, another earthen ramp leading into the river. Here was the second location, where Haruki and his mother disposed of the food waste, where Haruki fed the yokai. Haruki walked over to the gap in the trees, careful not to overstep the boundaries of their property, and with one great heave, flipped the serving dish upside down. The scraps and leftovers spilled out in a great pile upon the riverbank, some parts tumbling into the dark water. Haruki watched with fascination as, almost instantly, yokai began to appear out of the river to the scent of the food. Soon, a whole swarm of odd little creatures, all about an inch tall, surrounded the pile of scraps. Butano yokai, ugly little pig-like creatures, dirty, rude, and greedy, shoving their way forth and taking more than their fair share, Things like miniature royal ambassadors with eccentric headdresses, tiny fly goblins spitting and hissing as they landed from above and then snatched up their supplies to carry them away from the throng below. Delicate pixies on dragonfly wings, the men with long swaying mustaches. Lily pods, green-limbed men with flat green caps, elegantly rowing their way over upon their lily-pad rafts, using thin reeds as rowing sticks. Almost at once, the food was gone. Then, the yokai. Only the pig-like Butano yokai remained, squealing and snuffing around on the muddy bank for more. Haruki only had some rice left, stuck to the bottom of the bowl, which he was attempting to work free. But just as he was about to scrape it out with his bare hand, he heard his mother's voice calling out to him, "Haruki-kun! Haruki-kun!" He paused in his efforts. Better go back and tell her he was okay. Then he could get the second bowl of food, and maybe a scraping spoon too. He headed back to the rear corner of the house, and into the dim natural corridor beside it. The moonlight faded away, and the dark wall of leaves felt as though it was pressing in on him once again as he moved through the narrow section. He felt the sluggish black water just beyond the leaves, now so near, as if it would reach up and take him in. He shivered and hurried along. Then, a moment later, the yellow light of the kitchen at the other end of the pathway came back into view. Haruki's courage resurged, and he continued on in a less hurried fashion. He was now passing the second feeding bay, now on his left, and noticed something odd. The dirt ramp looked slick and wet, and the river's edge was disturbed. He stopped walking, forgetting about his mother's summons in his curiosity. As he inspected the muddy water, something larger than any yokai he had ever seen swirled into view from the river's edge. A large face. The face was pale, with a large splayed nose, red as if flushed from rice wine. It had large flabby cheeks, like rippling lard, which tapered up to a thimble-cone crown and formed the head into the shape of a squash. 5 or 6 individual strands of thick black hair hung flatly down its otherwise bald head. The face was fixed in an expression of sullen dejection. Apart from its unhealthy complexion and strange hair, it could have been the head of a security guard or a fat businessman, drunk with sake. It looked strange juxtaposed as it was upon the inky surface of the water. Haruki gasped silently and stepped backward a pace. He'd never seen such a big yokai. It must be a yokai. Or maybe an oni. He felt he should run, but as he went to move away, it spoke in a mild conversational tone. "Ah, is that all that's left? A shame. Go on, give it all up. I'm very hungry." Haruki felt compelled to obey and scraped some of the rice free from his bowl with his hand. The contents landed in a messy heap at the edge of the bank, half tumbling into the murky water. "Oh, this is delicious. Your mother cooked this?" "Yes, sir, yokai," replied Haruki in a proud but tremulous whisper. "She is a great cook," said the yokai gravely, lending much honor to Haruki's mother. Haruki wanted to leave, but the yokai continued talking, engaging his attention. Furthermore, polite manners demanded he shouldn't interrupt someone while they were talking. Father wouldn't approve of that, so he hesitated and stayed a little longer, just to let the yokai finish. "And what were these white wrapped things filled with pork?" the yokai asked. "Those are pork dumplings, sir yokai," replied Haruki with some confusion. He hadn't given the yokai any dumplings. Was it a yokai or an oni? "Ah, they are most appetizing." And then, as Haruki hurriedly scraped at the last contents of his serving bowl, "And what's that left over?" "Rice?" "Yes, sir yokai. It is only rice. You probably wouldn't like it very much." "Oh, I like it very much indeed. Don't be shy now. Throw it all in." It sat and watched politely as Haruki scraped the last of the rice into the edge of the mud. A hidden hand rose in a swath of water and dragged the muddy scraps away into the swirling depths below. Haruki was more confident now. The yokai was so reasonable and well-mannered. However, his bowl was empty, so he felt he should return for the other one now. Plus, his mother must be getting worried. "Oh, before you go, be a good fellow," said the yokai in the mildest of tones. "I see a single pea left on your bowl. It looks so delicious. It would be such a waste if it were to get away. Would you lean a little closer and pass that over?" Haruki felt a definite and peculiar compulsion to lean forward. A strange tension filled the air, and an almost inaudible deep bass sound filled Haruki's head for a split second, as if the air pressure was dropping, or perhaps rising. He hesitated on the brink of the garden for a second, then shook his head and withdrew, his young spirit sensing something amiss in the Oni's conduct, though not knowing exactly what. The Oni watched him calmly, with an expression of mild attentiveness, but said nothing as Haruki moved away, down the garden path and beyond its line of sight. Haruki looked at the yellow light pouring out of the open doorway at the end of the path. The night was quiet, and the garden seemed serenely still, lending a dreamlike quality to the scene. The golden light seemed to expand in the silent stillness, and to Haruki, the quiet scene before him seemed, for an instant, to dominate the entirety of his existence. He pushed through the strange sensation and hurried along, down the path, feeling the presence of the Oni at his back. He even looked backward quickly once or twice, to verify the Oni wasn't there, but each time he only saw the stillness of the garden, though the strange tension in the air remained and seemed to draw upon him. He reached the open doorway, shuddered, and then climbed up the high wooden step into the kitchen. He slipped off his sandals and called for his mother. "Mother! Mother!" Only a brooding silence greeted his cries. In a panic, he ran through the house, room by room, searching for his mother. The rooms were lifeless, empty, and dark. He returned to the dining room, to the vain comfort of its glowing lanterns. The Shinto shrine his father kept at one end of the dining room seemed to loom large to Haruki and draw upon him. He wandered over to it, face wet with the tears of fear and grief. Upon the shrine was the trinket his father had purchased off a traveling merchant some years ago, a miniature replica, only 8 inches long, of Ame no Nuboko. Without knowing why, he snatched it up and tucked it inside the breast of his shirt. Then, moving back to the kitchen area of the room, he noticed something. The second bowl of food waste was gone. The hairs on the back of his neck prickled as the words of the Oni flicked through his mind once more. "And what were these white wrapped things filled with pork?" "Those are pork dumplings, Sir Oni." "Ah, they are most appetizing." But he hadn't given the Oni any dumplings. With sudden alarm, Haruki connected the dots. His mother had disposed of the second bowl of food. The Oni then must know where she is. Haruki was afraid, but he didn't know what else to do. Besides, with father away in the city, he was now the man of the household, was he not? So, rallying his courage and slipping his sandals back on, he returned once again to the garden path. A strange feeling of déjà vu hit him as down the dim corridor he went. Once again, the warm light of the kitchen faded into grey. On his right, the gap in the leaves appeared, and there, the black river. And there was the Oni, waiting patiently, the mild, slightly pained look still on its face. He hadn't moved an inch. Haruki walked carefully to the boundary of the garden. The Oni smiled sheepishly and seemed to shrug apologetically under the water. "So," it said. "So, Oni?" "Yes." "Have you seen my mother?" "Oh, indeed. I was meaning to tell you this." The Oni rolled its eyes up to the sky as it spoke. "But you ran off so fast. I never got the chance." Haruki became excited, but also, a certain sick feeling was growing in his stomach. "Oh?" "Well then, Would you please tell me where she is, Sir Oni? I will indeed, since you are such a polite and well-mannered boy. She is here, in the river. Haruki's eyes went wide in alarm, and he